As some of you may know, Steven Sharif, the creative director at Intrepid Studios, joined the MMORPG subreddit for an Ashes of Creation Ask Me Anything. And in this video, I'm going to go over all of the questions that were asked. Some of them were quite good. I'll summarize the answers and also offer some of my own thoughts and opinions. If you guys end up enjoying this video, please subscribe for more Ashes of Creation content. Links to my Twitter and my Discord server will be below. Let's get right into it. The gameplay footage that I'll be using in this video will be from various stages of Ashes of Creation's development, so just keep that in mind. The first question asked was, what is your idea for the direction you'd like to take combat? And what are some of the big combat changes you want to test and implement in the future? The response from Steven is that his goal with combat from the beginning has been to have a hybrid between tab targeting and action combat, but he recognizes that it's a difficult thing to achieve because both combat systems can have very different tempos from each other. Other games have dipped into both styles before, but typically end up really favoring one combat style over the other. But with Ashes, he really wants to represent both styles, each in a substantial manner. Intrepid is currently playing heavily with the reticle mode, which is part of the action combat, and working on ways to make switching between both modes in combat come with ease and not with complication and confusion. They're working on things such as finding ways to incorporate tab targeting as part of a portion of an action mode. Players will also be able to spec down skill trees to have more of one style than the other if they so wish. And all of this is being tested, and things are of course subject to change and will change over time. And we've already seen Intrepid working on split body movements, which is basically when the upper half of your character is doing a spell animation or an ability animation while their bottom half, which is your character's legs, are still able to move freely. And with this comes some challenges because you don't want the players to feel, or your characters to feel, too floaty, as everyone's calling it, but you also don't want your characters to feel like they're weighted to the ground when you're in these intense, crazy battles. So this is something that Intrepid Studios is openly working on and sharing their thoughts with us, and I'm excited to see where they take it. The second question asked was if the Bard class will be a support class, or if it will be more of an all-rounded fighter with support capabilities. Steven's answer to this was that one of the Bard's primary components in Ashes is their support abilities, but that there will also be the jack-of-all-trades type of aspects to the class that offer offensive-focused abilities, defensive ones, and so on. Bards are going to be a very proximity and positional focused class, so even though they may excel in support, these support aspects are going to be very active and engaging to a player as well as their party. Steven says that they're playing around with offering multiple steps for some of the support type spells. For example, maybe as a bard you do an AoE buff to your party, giving them a critical hit boost. After that's been given, there may be a second optional step for that buff that may involve players having to move to a certain position or get in a certain formation. And if they're able to successfully do this, they'll then receive an even more enhanced buff on top of the initial one. So these are the types of ideas that are being brought to the table and of course tested, and from my perspective I think it will bring a lot of engagement to more support type roles. Also an and my voice is really just not with it today, but I got to get this video done so I can give you guys this news tomorrow. Also, bards in Ashes of Creation aren't necessarily just like musicians in terms of playing instruments. They can also be writers, poets, and artists of all different types. The third question asked was if there's going to be original soundtracks for certain individual bosses, like their own theme. Steven's answer to this made it very clear that Intrepid understands the importance of music in games, and how music can really help immerse players and also create immersive emotional responses to in-game activities. So the answer to this question is yes. Steven also elaborated a bit here and said that areas with specific bosses will have soundtracks that help build up to the moment when you actually see the boss, for a crescendo moment. I really love to hear things like this because game and movie soundtracks are really important for an experience, in my opinion. I don't even ever play any outside music when playing games, regardless of if I'm just chilling or not. I still use the in-game music. That's how much I value the immersiveness that music can bring to the table. Intrepid's composer actually has an extensive and impressive resume, as he's worked on shows such as Black Sails, Outlander, and games such as God of War and Battlestar Galactica. In question number 4, which seems to be quite a popular subject to speculate about, can you tell your plans on how the summoner class will interact with the other archetypes? So for those who don't know, there are 8 primary archetypes in Ashes of Creation, and this choice is essentially your class choice. These are the holy trinity classes of MMOs. Their names and the way that they generally play should have some familiarity to MMO players. Your secondary archetype choice, which you make at level 25, is where you'll start to augment your primary archetype's abilities. This is technically your class in Ashes of Creation, but generally speaking, your primary archetype is your class and your secondary archetype is kind of like your subclass. So the summoner class in a general sense is of course focused on portraying power through pets. Your secondary archetype choice is really going to be what allows your pet to specialize in being tanky or DPS focused, support focused, and so on. The summoner class will be a very versatile class, and it's up to the players to choose what they want to specialize in. If we take a look at the chart, for example, if you choose summoner and then go over to the tank column for your secondary archetype choice, I think it's safe to assume that the Brood Warden summoners will have tanky pets. Question number 5 was any announcement as to who will replace Jeffrey Bard? So Jeffrey Bard was the lead game designer at Intrepid Studios for the past 5 years, and he recently left to pursue a job in the VR industry. Steven said no announcement today, but we might find out by August. Question number 6, and I think this is a really cool one, is how extensive will gambling be? Tavern games or gambling halls? And will it be done with gold or an alternate currency specifically for gambling? In terms of the currency, Steven basically said that he doesn't know yet, but that they're playing around with an alternate currency that could possibly be used to make unique purchases, such as with cosmetics. They will also be considering using the main currency of players for gambling, but he absolutely knows that there is going to be potential problems. This is stuff that needs to be discussed, debated, and of course tested. Steven did elaborate a bit more on tavern gambling games, and I thought this was a really interesting part. So the idea and motivation behind having tavern games is to bring another social aspect to the Ashes of Creation world, where walking into a tavern might actually provide some neat ways to meet new people and play some games. Steven even said that some tavern games might have to be acquired by players finding them in the world and then bringing that game back to a tavern. This is really cool stuff in my opinion, and it seems like Intrepid Studios really wants to bring back many social interactions to the MMO space, and over the past 10 years or so it seems like those have been kind of going away as MMOs start to focus more on solo play. So making taverns actually a fun place to go, where you're going to have a lot of player engagement and make new friends or even enemies, is something that I'm really excited for, and I can't wait to see it play out. Question number 7. Will there be difficult content that is made for more of the hardcore fan base for a challenging experience and perhaps cosmetic rewards? Steven said yes, but really only elaborated on one example, and this is how the Ashes of Creation dungeon mechanics will adapt to the group in the dungeon. For example, if you're part of a raid group that sweeps through the first 2 bosses of a dungeon quickly with no deaths, the next boss in the dungeon might have enhanced mechanics to make it more difficult. The AI is going to react to each group. So this could come from seeing more AoE attacks, rage mechanics introduced on bosses, and so on. I do like the idea of this as well if it can be implemented correctly, and not even just for the more challenging content part of it, but also when you're playing with different groups, this may offer slightly different experiences within the same dungeon, bringing more variety to each dungeon. Question number 8. Can you share or tell us anything about the development of the orc races, particularly the Vek? Steven's response to this was that we'll likely see more on orcs later in the year, and when this time comes we'll be seeing more on all of the races. Right now, all that he shared with us is that the Renkai and the Vek orcs will be very different in appearance from each other. The Renkai are your buff warrior looking orcs, while the Vek are more goblinoid looking. With these visual disparities will also come several animation differences as well. Question number 9 was a good question, and it's going to certainly be interesting to see it all play out. So how will you stop the big Mafia Guilds from owning all the good dungeons and the world bosses by camping them? Steven's main answer to this is that Ashes of Creation is an ever-changing game with its node system. It's a massive world that's constantly changing. Nodes are spawning and despawning, bringing about and taking away some of the world content. And the nature of this will make it difficult for one guild to truly dominate. There will also be variant time windows on world bosses, dungeons that open and close, and there'll be guild size limitations and more. Steven also brought up that in-game politics and all the pseudo-factions within the game will also bring drama and disruption to one guild attempting to take full control. It'll be a very hard task for one guild to truly dominate, and he believes the game will sort itself out with its systems and mechanics. Like I said, this will be an interesting one to see how it plays out. Question number 10. What is your opinion on expansions making all previous content obsolete and effectively reducing the amount of meaningful content as opposed to expanding it? The answer to this is once again that Ashes is an ever-changing world, and all systems are integrated with each other with the node system. Players will be utilizing the nodes for many important services, which will keep much of the previous content still relevant. Even as a new player to the game, what you do as you level up will be contributing to a node's development, so everyone will be playing a role in the world regardless of which piece of content that you're currently on. Number 11 is perhaps the most controversial and exciting topic, open world PvP. The question asked is, how can you ensure that open world PvP will not eventually make the game unplayable for small guilds and individuals? Steven's answer to this is the severity of the corruption system. His goal is to outright deter PKing players on a frequent basis. So if a moment in time comes when you want to attempt to PK a player for whatever risk versus reward scenario that's going on, or whatever emotions you might be feeling in the moment, you can absolutely do this. But you will face the consequences and also likely not want to do or even be able to do it again if you're killed while you're corrupted. Corruption is a very bad negative status to have on your character in Ashes of Creation. You can lose your completed gear, you take 4 times the normal death penalty, you accrue death XP at a much faster rate, your skills start becoming less effective from corruption modifiers, you'll have a bounty on your head for citizens of military nodes, among many other things. Steven once again says that it's his goal to deter outright PKing on a frequent basis, and through testing he's willing to change and modify things to make his goal come true. He also said that there needs to be an element of risk that exists in the open world, and the reason is that from an economic standpoint, there are core pieces of the economy that relate to the traversal of goods across regions, and this is how you make some legendary items and establish a crafting empire. This type of system needs to have an element of risk associated with it, which is why he has this plan for the open world PvP. So I personally really do like what I'm hearing here, but I do have some concerns as to whether or not it will truly work. Players will surprise you in the craziest ways and go to extreme lengths just to troll other players. This is something that we do have to keep in mind, but I do like where Steven's mindset is at with this open world PvP. I think we got a good starting basis to start testing things, and I hope that we can find a way to make it work. Question number 12 also kind of dealt with PvP. We've heard a lot about the PvP side of the game, and we know that 80% of the world is supposed to be contestable. So what will Ashes of Creation be able to offer PvE focused players that does not involve PvP? Steven first brought up that most of the content that they've talked about up to this point has actually been PvE focused, but of course the contestable aspect of this brings in an element of PvP, and this is how Ashes will be. This doesn't mean that all PvE activities will result in PvP, because there's going to be many friendly interactions between players, and guilds will be helping to keep zones safe, and so on. In terms of straight up PvE content, without even the slightest chance of PvP, we'd have to look towards the instance dungeons at this time. It's also important to keep in mind that there will be many activities that are PvP focused that you opt in and opt out of, so you don't necessarily have to participate in these PvP activities such as sieges, guild wars, and caravans. Question number 13. Each metropolis has a superpower. For instance, scientific nodes allow teleportation between the parent node and any of its vassal nodes for its citizens. Can you tell us any of the other node type superpowers? So for those not familiar, when a node reaches its max growth stage as a metropolis, depending on the node's type, that node will gain superpowers. Currently in an economic node, you'll gain auction benefits. Scientific nodes will get teleportation benefits. And then there's military nodes and divine nodes, which we don't really know much about. Steven didn't give us any definitive answers here, but he did say that for divine nodes, when they get their superpowers, they're looking into incorporating a structure of catacomb-based dungeons that are ultra difficult. These will be the meta catacombs of dungeons and may connect to other divine nodes. So he's really just sharing with us ideas that they have for the divine node superpowers, and this is some dungeon system underneath the city, which I think is pretty cool. And question number 14, the last question and a great way to end. You said before that Ashes of Creation is not for everyone. Can you please describe what we can expect from the game? The simple answer to this was, I think you can safely not expect this to be a trophy for everyone game. I personally love to hear this, and this is why I vibe with Ashes of Creation so much up to this point. I'm perfectly fine with games that are easy and give everyone everything without them actually having to do much work for it or show any skill. Those types of games typically are not necessarily for me. I do play some of them, but I know a lot of people enjoy them, and we all play games for different reasons, and your enjoyment in a game is really all that matters. If you're having fun regardless of the type of game. But hearing Steven say things like this that indicate that Ashes is not a participation trophy type of game is something that I personally vibe with. It's what I want in a video game. I don't want trophies for doing easy tasks. I want to work for trophies. I want to practice. I want to show skill. I want to put the time in. And some of these things just don't work with all players. Some people have different schedules. They can only play for a couple hours a week. Some people just don't have the computer skills, and all that's just fine. But it's nice to finally hear a gaming company, and a big gaming company at that, because they're growing and they're making such a large MMO, talk like this. It's almost a little risky for Intrepid Studios to do this, because they could streamline their MMO and then do a pay-to-win cosmetic cash shop and just get so much more business, I guess you could say. But instead, it seems like they want to create an MMO that really vibes with a player base that's kind of been left out over the past 10 years or so, but at the same time trying to make a game where people that don't necessarily love risk versus reward still might be able to get a lot of enjoyment out of Ashes. Like I said, my hopes with the open world PvP is that on the servers we set up ways for players that don't necessarily want to engage in open world PvP. We set up ways for them to be able to do things successfully. So if you have someone in your guild that's a big time resource gatherer, a big time crafter, you can send bodyguards out with him or her, and it'll make the experience for everyone so much more engaging and intense. Even for the person that doesn't like PvP, having people come out to help protect that person might offer a different experience for them as well. I don't know, I'm really vibing with a lot of the things that Steven says about his game. I do have my concerns with many things as well, but yeah, it's nice to hear this stuff. So thanks for listening to my rant at the end there, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and the information that I presented. Many more Ashes up, much more Ashes of Creation content to come, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll also be live streaming this game as well. Until next time.